Hello, everybody. Thrilled to have you with us here on this Wednesday evening. This is One-on-One coming to you at night. Well, not quite, depending on where you're watching us, but glad to have you with us nonetheless. Alongside Andrew Galata and Nick DeLuca, who will have along with us in just a moment, I'm Jimmy Sullivan. Glad you could be with us here on Twitter or YouTube, however you may be watching. Andrew, it is great to be with you on this Wednesday evening, and we certainly have a lot to get into over the next hour and a half, taking you up until 7:30 here on this Wednesday evening.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's crazy sports. I mean, we got three really sports right now at its peak, I would say. We have baseball playoffs, we got NBA finals, and then football getting in the swing of things. College football, too, should be really, really fun in this one.
Certainly looking forward to the next hour and a half with you. If you want to chime in on anything we are talking about here tonight, you can leave a comment, whether it be on Twitter or YouTube, either broadcast. Just leave a comment, and we will get to it in due time. And let's bring in the third member of our crew here, Nick DeLuca, because, Nick, frankly, we need you. Talking about some Yankees here after last night's 7-5 loss in the ALDS Game 2 to the Rays. They are currently tied 1-1 in that series. It was a questionable night pitching-wise for the Yankees. They started David Garcia, went to Jay Happ after just an inning of work on Garcia's end. Game 3 tonight at 7:10 p.m. officially. Masahiro Tanaka is going to get the start for the Yankees. Yankees not in a bad spot right now, but last night a disappointing game. A lot of different subplots going in there. Nick, I'll bring you in on this. An interesting night, to say the least, for the Yankees, not only with the pitching. The umpiring was extremely questionable. They missed some opportunities with runners in scoring position. How do you think Yankee fans should be feeling heading into Game 3 tonight with Tanaka on the mound and a 1-1 tie in the series, which is now down to a best of 3?
Well, Jimmy, I appreciate your kind introduction. It's always nice to feel needed, so I'll just get that out of the way first. How they should be feeling anxious, I think, is probably the best word, because this is a huge game number 3 that we're going to see tonight. And after Game 2, in the way that unfolded, there may not be as much room for optimism as maybe you would have had following Game 1. A lot of head-scratching decisions made by managers, made by umpires, as you alluded to with C.B. Buckner, who was putrid behind the plate last night. How Major League Baseball allows him to call balls and strikes in a postseason game is incredible. And I said maybe in the wild card series where you're running out of umpires by sheer numbers of having 8 games being played, you need that number. But no way in the ALDS can CB Buckner be behind the plate. That's just ridiculous. The move that everyone was talking about, of course, is Davy Garcia out after 1 inning, using that opener to try and sort of gear the Rays up for a lefty-laden lineup, and then reversing course and going to Jay Happ as your bulk guy, using Garcia as an opener. And I know that the Yankees have been getting a lot of flack for this, and I think it's well-deserved, but maybe not in sort of the way that might sound traditional. I didn't hate the move to give Happ the opportunity to pitch against more lefties, because I think the Yankees were concerned about his ability to go through the Rays lineup. And I think he proved that last night, that he struggled. He was not somebody who you're in love with pitching against a powerful Rays lineup, who, albeit isn't the best, but still a good lineup in their own right. So the Yankees' concern was legitimate. It felt like they were trying to be a little bit too cute, which is unfortunate. Sometimes you're running sort of trickery because you're not confident in what you have. And I don't know, maybe the Yankees shouldn't be confident in what they have because their starting rotation has been decimated by injury. It would be really nice to have one of, if not both, Luis Severino and James Paxton right now. So to answer your question about what the heck we saw last night, I didn't hate it. I maybe you wanted to save Garcia later, but if you feel like David Garcia can still come back and pitch for you in Game 4, maybe they feel more comfortable with Jordan Montgomery in Game 4, and you can make that evaluation. I didn't hate the strategy. You hate the outcome because Happ pitched so poorly, and it just goes to show you that the Yankees are going to really need the guys that they have relied on all year to step up in the bullpen and in terms of starting pitching, because Masahiro Tanaka needs to go out and pitch well for them tonight.
Yeah, and it's also interesting you bring up the decision. I also didn't hate it, although the opener is only as good as the second person in it. So if that's going to be Jay Happ and the way he pitched last night, you're going to have problems. I also think in a 5-game series with no off days, it's a lot harder to justify. I think if you had an off day today, like you would after 2 games of the series, I think it would have been a lot easier to justify. This is an organizational decision. Aaron Boone's going to take the bullet for it, but he was not alone in making this call, even though he's the manager. Here is how he explained the logic behind only pitching David Garcia 1 inning in last night's game.
Felt like, I was going to go to Jay pretty early and aggressively, as long as they went with the heavy lefty lineup, and that was the reason. Kind of labored a little bit through that first inning. Is on the verge of getting out of it, though, with 2 strikes there with a Rosarena. When he gets them, clips them. But no, that was the plan all along. We're going to go short with him, knowing we would have Davey available, later in the series if need be too.
All right, so that was Aaron Boone explaining the decision to go to Jay Happ starting with the second inning. Obviously, it blew up in their faces. Jay Happ came into the game. It was tied 1-1, and he left the game in a far worse spot. It didn't even make it through 3 innings of that game for the Yankees and dug them into a pretty big hole, one that they were unable to climb out of, and they wind up losing Game 2. Guys, Andrew, I'll go to you first here. The Yankees use an opener here, but they wind up, using Jay Happ in Game 2, wind up using some guys in that bullpen as well, although not all of the big guns. So I think they're in a pretty good spot there, but some curious decision-making that's, I think, pretty easy to second guess for the Yankees, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I feel like the Yankees, their pitching depth is definitely, especially starting pitching, is something that they're obviously trying to hide. They went with the opener to try to shield Jay Happ a little bit, and it didn't work out for them. And now you're kind of in a hole. You need some big starting pitching performances tonight, and then also in their next game with Tanaka and then Montgomery, because let's say one of them kind of have a bad start, they go short in these games, then your bullpen's getting used even more. And again, the same problems that these Yankees teams had over the past 3 years now are starting to rear their ugly head once again. Also, they're very reliant on the home run ball. I know we haven't talked about it yet, but 11 runs in these first 2 games are off the home run ball. At a certain point, you're either going to have to hit them in bunches or it's going to dry up. And that's something that, again, has really been the same type of problems in my mind for the Yankees. And until they're able to fix them, maybe Tanaka, he was been very good in the postseason over his career. If he can continue that, that would be huge for them. But right now, I mean, this is definitely a dicey situation over these next 3 games and something that I'm very excited to see.
And Andrew, we saw that big swinging mindset in the 9th inning last night. They're down 3. They've got Sanchez, then Judge, then LeMahieu coming up. And we saw Sanchez and Judge taking massive cuts, getting blown away by fastballs. And then we saw DJ LeMahieu get up there, kind of a short swing, pokes it back up the middle. They bring in a run. So it's not a balanced mindset for the Yankees. It's working for them offensively right now, but it's cyclically, as you say, probably going to be something that at some point maybe they shouldn't be reliant on as much. And we were talking, a bunch of us, during the game last night, not just the people on this show, about how if maybe Judge or Sanchez or some of these other guys came up with DJ LeMahieu's mindset in the 9th inning of that game last night, maybe they'd be in better shape. Just the numbers on J Happ, so they can be entered into the record here. 2 2/3 innings, 5 hits, 4 runs, 3 walks, 2 strikeouts. And not exactly what you're looking for out of somebody who comes in relief of the opener. But for game 3 tonight, a really good pitching matchup tonight. Masahiro Tanaka, Charlie Morton going tonight. This is a big game because game 4 for the Yankees, you're starting Jordan Montgomery. That could be a game that could be win or go home. So I think ultimately that's the biggest issue for the Yankees, is that they're going to wind up starting Montgomery. Nothing against him. He's shown some really good flashes during the regular season, but that could be a dicey spot, as you say, Andrew, and they could be down 2-1. I think you feel good with Tanaka on the mound tonight, given how good he's been in the playoffs, but it's something to remember. If the Yankees lose this series, I think game 2 might be the game they wind up most regretting.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that with them, I think they're really kind of banking on Tanaka tonight. I think their big thing going into this season was, look, we have Cole, he's our ace, and then we're hoping once Tanaka comes into postseason, we could really have 2 aces. And I think that was something that they were banking on. Now we'll see if it comes true, because right now I think the Yankees could win and they can go really far in this playoffs with 2 aces, with Tanaka pitching at his best, Garrett Cole looking like Garrett Cole. And again, you kind of need those guys, because behind them, you definitely have some struggles. Montgomery, I don't think you trust him to go more than 4 or 5 innings. And I don't know if the Yankees will need them to go more than 4 or 5 innings. But again, it could be a winner go home type game. And having him pitch that's definitely something that I'd be nervous of if I was a Yankees fan. And right now, again, it's something that they need this game. As you were saying, I mean, I think Tanaka, him going out, having a nice performance would really show a lot of kind of this uncertainty with the Yankees and their starting pitching. This would be a big game for him to step up. And I think it could be a really big one for him.
I think that Yankees fans should be a little bit nervous. And to push back a little bit on what you just said, Andrew, in terms of recurring issues, I agree with you, but I disagree. And here's where I do. I think the Yankees have done a good enough job in addressing some of those problems. The most recurring issue is that they've had injuries. It's been the injuries the last 3 years that have really given them problems, because I think when you look up and down their roster, they've addressed them fine. It's just the guys that they need to address those issues aren't available right now. If you had Luis Severino and then James Paxton in games 2 and 3, this series would look a lot different. You wouldn't be nervous at all, because you'd say we've got 2 of the better starters in the American League going into games 2 and games 3. And then there are some issues with the bullpen, and you're like, I don't love this bullpen right now. Well, if Tommy Kahnle's down there, you're looking at a different unit. So I will say it cut the Yankees in terms of roster construction, and that really is directed at Brian Cashman some slack, in that they just need to find a way to get everybody healthy. That said, those guys aren't coming back, so we're going to throw them out and talk about the series. Yankees need to find a way. They need to have Tanaka tonight go out and be playoff Tanaka. They need 5-6 innings from him and put their bullpen in a good position to win the baseball game. And that's the reality of it. Their lineup, I think, has been very good in this series. And I think on the whole, maybe a few too many strikeouts in this past game in game 2. But I think for the most part, they've stayed disciplined. They've had a good approach. And quite frankly, the 4 and the 5 runs are good enough to win games in the postseason. They're scoring. That's not the issue. The problem is that the starting pitching, well, the bulk guy let them down last night and into their relief pitching. So to me, that's the one issue. And then if you are going to pick at the offense, and there's one gripe that I have, it's that they need to find a way to hit the Rays bullpen. Because once the Rays got out of glass now, they really weren't able to do much. And they are facing some difficult relievers. Nick Anderson in one, who I thought pitched very well last night. But Pete Fairbanks left the door open for them in the ninth. He could not find control to save his life. Yankees at times helped him out. That was the one time this series, and when you're looking at the 18 innings, that I felt that they might have left the strike zone, were a little over anxious. And they really, I thought, helped out Fairbanks in getting out of that inning, even though they brought the tying run onto first base. So it's going to be about that matchup, I think, in seeing if the Yankees offense can do some damage against the Rays bullpen. If not, it may be a difficult series for them to win. But it's that combination of getting to the Rays bullpen and finding success, and also being successful with your own pitching staff. And that starts with Tanaka tonight.
And I think it's important to remember, guys, the Yankees are not necessarily in a bad spot. We both thought, I know, Nick, you picked the Yankees. I picked the Rays. Andrew, I don't know who you had, but I think we all thought this series was going to go at least 4, if not 5, because it's a pretty evenly matched series between these two teams. And most people, after 2 games, when you have, Garrett Cole on the mound in game 1, the Yankees with question marks as to who would be the pitcher in game 2, I think most people probably thought it was going to be 1-1. And, Garrett Cole the other night, I don't think had his best stuff, just gutted his way through 6 innings, a really tough, impressive outing to just give up 3 runs in the 6th. I think the Yankees feel okay. The Rays feel okay. And I still look at this as a very evenly matched series, but the Yankees are not in a terrible spot. Although, Nick, you did bring up a good point about the Rays bullpen. They have a ton of guys you could turn to, whether it's Nick Anderson, who is one of the best relievers, if not the best reliever in baseball this season, Diego Castillo, Pete Fairbanks, Josh Curtis, who got blown up the other night, but had a really good year. Who hits the other team's bullpen is going to be really key in this series. And we saw the Rays do that last night. If you want to count J as being in the bullpen last night, again, that's debatable, but I think that's a big key to this series. And those late inning runs always prove so large. But when the Rays did go to that bullpen last night to put out the fire, they were able to do so. Now, I do think the Yankees come into this game with more rest for their top end guys like Britton, like Chapman. I think not using Chapman really in the first 2 games of this series, I think that's a big plus for the Yankees. I think having him fresh and rested, if there's a close game down the stretch tonight, will be big. But you mentioned Nick Tommy Kahnle, and that's a guy who could have really helped the Yankees, particularly last night, to not have that game go out of control on you early on. But the overarching point here is that these 2 teams are very evenly matched. And so we're all prisoners of the moment here, right? I'll be the first to admit it. But the Yankees are not in a horrible position, even though they lost a game last night that they, could have won. But it's not like, oh, the sky is falling, they're going to lose the series. No, I think it's far from that. I think they're going to have their chance to win this series, and it's probably going to come down to a couple at bats down the stretch here, because I'm still of the belief it'll go the distance. Nick, I think probably you feel the same way.
I picked him in 5.
Yeah, I think it'll go to 5 games, and then you get into a winner-take-all game, and anything can happen. So I don't think the Yankees are in a horrible spot right now. It's just a virtue of the fact they're playing a really good team right now in the Tampa Bay Rays. And when you do that in the playoffs, these things are going to happen. So I still think the series goes 5 games, but I think the Yankees, even with last night, don't have to hate where they're at all. I don't think they're necessarily in a dire straits type of situation, even though they lost last night.
No, yeah, I actually have the series going 5-2. And I think that these 2 teams are 2 really good baseball teams, 2 teams that definitely right now look at the cream of the crop of the AL. And honestly, I think that it's going to come down to a few at-bats, and it's going to come down to, I think I agree with you guys, who's going to hit the bullpen. And that's where I'm a little more wary about the Yankees, just because situational hitting, I think the Rays are a better situational hitting team right now. I just don't like relying on the home run ball. That's just something that kind of I would then lean towards the Rays. And especially when you're playing really good pitching and in big situations, you have guys charging up to hit home runs when you only need singles just to keep the rally going. I think that it could be the death of the Yankees, just like it was the death of the Yankees last year and then the year before. So that's really why I'm going to pick the Rays, but it will go deep. I think that this game, I could easily see the Yankees winning this one with Tanaka on the mound. And I think it's going to be really a great series, and it definitely will come down to a few at-bats down the stretch.
No, I agree with you in terms of it being pretty close to the same issues that the Yankees have faced throughout the last couple of postseasons. And I would even grant you that a few things need to go differently than they did in 2018 and 2019 for them to have success here in 2020. The difference I would raise you is that the Astros aren't as good. The Rays aren't as good as some of the teams that they ran through with the Red Sox and then the Astros even last year. I think it's close. I do think it's close, but I don't think the lineup with the pitching is the same the way the Astros and the Red Sox were in the last couple of years. So we'll see. The competition may be a little bit easier in that sense, particularly when you don't have to play games on the road. It's at a neutral site, which is a disadvantage to the Yankees, but also an advantage for them, especially in this series. You would not want to play 3 out of these 5 games in Tropicana. So it's going to come down to a few at-bats, as you guys mentioned, and I do think that this game is going to be won in the bullpen. You'd have to give that leg up to the Tampa Bay Rays right now. There's no doubt about that you would say that the Yankees are going to have a tougher time hitting that bullpen that is stronger than the Rays would against the Yankees. That said, the Yankees have a better lineup, so we'll see how it shakes out. But I'm really excited for a Game 3 with a lot on the line, and maybe Masahiro Tanaka can deliver a vintage performance where the bullpens aren't even a factor.
Yeah, looking forward to that game. That'll be on actually during the end of our show, so we might have some updates for you on that, depending on what happens
He's
there.
Gonna do play-by-play for you.
Yeah, now, I thought you were doing it, Nick, but I don't.
I thought
we could split it.
That's what I thought, but I don't know. We probably should have had a production meeting about that, right?
Yeah, well, hey, that's up to the producer ultimately. So I'm not going to take the blame on that. But the last point I'll make just before we go to break here. Everybody talks about the Yankees being all or nothing in terms of hitting the home run. The Rays kind of are too. The Rays have a high strikeout rate. They hit a lot of home runs. They're capable of going cold as well. So, a lot of the things we ascribe to the Yankees offense, we could also say about the Rays. But there are things going right for the Yankees, obviously. Giancarlo Stanton is killing the ball. He's hit 3 home runs in just this series alone, 5 home runs in the postseason in 4 games. So that, I think, is a huge plus for the Yankees going into this. If he can stay hot, if nothing else, just to be in the middle of that lineup, a guy that the Rays will avoid pitching to, I think that's a really, really big plus. But guys, good discussion. We will have Nick back later in the show. Andrew and I taking you up until 7:30 in the East as the sun goes down. We're talking some basketball next. Lakers up 3-1 heading into Game 5 of the finals against the Heat on Friday night. We'll talk about the NBA Finals, what it means going forward if the Lakers win a championship, and much more. Stick with us. Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show, taking you up until 7:30 here in the East. We're on Twitter, we're on YouTube. Leave a comment on either platform if you want to chime in on the action, and we will get to it in due time. Andrew and Jimmy with you, taking you through the next hour or so. Let's get into some basketball here. The Lakers with a big victory last night over the Heat. They take a 3-1 series lead. Game 5 is on Friday night at 9 from the Orlando bubble. Lakers 1 win away from their first championship since 2010. It would be LeBron James's 4th championship. Andrew, so many different storylines with this NBA Finals. It's a fascinating series. The Heat are shorthanded. The Lakers come in with two of the best players in the league, and LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But Andrew, as you look at this Lakers 3-1 lead, how are you feeling about their chances to close things out on Friday night against a Heat team that, although shorthanded, has been very competitive and has shown us that they are not going to go away lightly?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Lakers will close it out on Friday, winning this one in 5. But I mean, this is no knock to the Heat. I think they've played as hard as you can really ask them to. They're playing, I think, shorthanded to start the series by not having two huge stars, and definitely being underdogs to start. Then you lose a couple of your big players. And then they've played very motivated. They could easily said, look, this was obviously not our series. We don't have as many stars. We don't have as many. We lost some players. And then they came in here and they played their hearts out these last few games. They won a big one behind Jimmy Butler in game 3. But I just think the Lakers have too much. I mean, LeBron, AD, they're playing right now at the top of their games. And again, this was a series that I think a lot of people picked the Lakers. I mean, the Heat definitely played extremely hard, and they're just very fun to watch too. I like watching them. Really nice, complementary brand of basketball. But I think right now the Lakers got this one on lock, and that's what I think.
Yeah, the Lakers certainly in a great spot. Shout out to Jimmy Butler. 40 points in game 3, 11 rebounds, 13 assists. I saw a stat. It was really funny. They had a stat right before game 4 started on ESPN, and it was players to drop 40 points in a triple-double in the NBA Finals without a 3-point attempt. It was Jimmy Butler, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Shaq. That was literally it, which is insane to think about. But shout out to Jimmy Butler, just dragging his team through this series, quite frankly. Yeah. But as you said, they lost Goran Dragic, who was their leading scorer in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Lost Bam Adebayo, who's one of the great young players in the NBA, can do so much, and was the primary defender on Anthony Davis, which is also important. And without those guys, some of those possessions in crunch time now are going to Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson. You know, no offense to those guys, not guys that you're going to put the ball in their hands with a couple minutes to go in a big game needing a basket. So tough break for the Heat, but let's move over to the Lakers now. This will be LeBron James's 4th championship if he pulls it off. Anthony Davis's 1st. And Andrew, LeBron now, assuming the Lakers don't blow this big lead, which, you know, we've seen what happens in 3-run leads in the NBA Finals in the past. But assuming that doesn't happen, LeBron now will have won with 3 different teams. Only a handful of guys have done that in the NBA. And he's probably the only guy to do it on 3 different teams and be the best player on those teams. So, Andrew, just incredibly impressive performance by LeBron and the Lakers in the bubble. They're 1 game away from a championship. It's hard to measure just how incredible it is. The Lakers' performance throughout the bubble, especially the last couple of rounds. Andrew, it's just been so impressive. And LeBron James in year 17 on the brink of his 4th championship.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's had a great career and a lot of like ups and downs. He had obviously starting off with the Cavs, no one really on his team. Then he goes to the Heat, kind of like his college years, people say, grows up, comes back to the Heat, wins a championship. And then just to throw another wrinkle into his legacy, winning a championship in a bubble situation that you can't really, I mean, going into that, anything could happen because these guys, they've played in front of huge crowds with definitely feeding off that emotion. And then now there's really none of that. And you got to create your own. And LeBron, AD, they've been able to do that. And it's something that, look, it just shows how great he is and probably the best player of our generation here to start. And then you start with that argument, him or Jordan. Now he's got his 4th ring, three separate teams, three separate storylines, bringing three franchises really to greatness here. And again, it's something that it starts to become an argument. Maybe he's going to have to win a few more to really kind of solidify himself. I think he does. And this road, especially, it was a pretty easy one to get to the finals, and hope seems like winning it. So again, it's definitely questionable to see where LeBron fits. But again, this run, especially adding now in the bubble as well, it's very, very impressive in my mind.
Incredibly impressive. And our producer, Alex Wools, tweeted this out when they won the conference finals, that LeBron James has been to the finals 10 years out of 17 in the league. So you have a better chance. Now, I'm bad at math, but you have a better chance of going to the finals than not as you look at his career. Just incredible. He's been to 10 finals. He likely will win 4 of them. And you bring up the bubble. It's a great point, because this is the first time we've ever seen a really destination neutral site NBA finals. Hopefully it's the last with COVID-19, and whether or not we have a vaccine next year, that is to be determined. But to win it in a bubble when you're closed off from the rest of the world for 2.5 months, of games, all told, it's going to be more than 3 months. Andrew, I think that adds another layer to his legacy. I think you're absolutely right. And, we were going into the bubble thinking, okay, well, which teams are going to enjoy this environment more than others? And LeBron James, I remember saying right before the NBA shut down, when they were talking about not having fans in arenas, he said, look, that's a drastic game changer. And he was talking about considering not playing. Now, I think that was more spur of the moment, that he didn't really think about it before he opened his mouth. But it's an interesting point. And the fact that he's adjusted to that, and the Lakers have too, remarkably well, I think that's just another notch in his legacy, that he was able to set aside all of the stuff from the bubble, because the bubble is all encompassing, right? It's just you're playing basketball, that's all you're doing. And the fact that he's been able to thrive in this environment and help the team along and thriving in that environment as well, I think absolutely should be part of that legacy, Andrew, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the Clippers. I mean, they're a team that are coming in here supposed to thrive, and they end up getting upsetted for whatever reason. Maybe it had to do.
We don't talk about the Clippers.
Yeah, but hey, they were supposed to be that would have been a crazy conference finals. We didn't get it because I think it was a lack of focus on their minds. I mean, look, when you're up big, obviously, it's like you're in the bubble. You're like, okay, we finally got this. And it's like, nope. Again, like I could definitely not having home games, I think, hurt the Clippers as well, like playing on an equal footing, really. So again, LeBron being able to have that focus, the Lakers, he's basically willing the Lakers to have that focus. Obviously, he's the main driving force on their team. And it just shows, like, again, he's definitely, to me, he's the best player in the world right now. I think he kind of took that back. And again, what he does on the court, it just shows, like, whenever he steps on the court, it's like almost unbeatable right now. That's really what he is.
It's the longevity of it too.
Yeah.
Because you just brought it up about how, if you would have told me 5 years ago that LeBron would still be the best player in the world,
yeah,
I don't know. It would have been a tough sell, because he was not young then. He was 30, 31 years old. Now he's 35, going on 36.
Mm-hmm.
And here he is, still incredibly athletic, still so skilled, still leading his team to great heights. And the funny thing about the bubble that you mentioned is that, every game's neutral site, obviously, but the team that theoretically would have been hurt the most by that is the Lakers, because they're the number 1 seed. Yeah. So that they lose all those home playoff games. And yet here they are willing their way through it. Just so impressive. Also, just want to give a shout out while we're on the subject of LeBron. Let's also shout out Anthony Davis, who traded to the Lakers, is about to win his first championship. Andrew, I've been amazed by Anthony Davis as well. I mean, he is one of the few guys that we've seen in the playoffs. I don't know how you feel about this. He's been completely unguardable. Like, there have been teams have tried so many different things against him. We specifically saw that against the Nuggets, but he has been almost impossible for any team to guard. And he has been as big of a reason as any as to why the Lakers are 1 game away from a championship.
I mean, he's probably one of the best Robins, I think, to ever play here in the NBA. He's playing outstanding. I mean, in my mind, I mean, he's definitely outplayed LeBron in some games. I mean, I think there's a actual conversation who's going to win Finals MVP, him or Davis. I think they'll probably give it to LeBron just because that's kind of like a big storyline, getting LeBron another MVP. But look, I wouldn't be surprised how as good as Davis has played if they gave it to him. And I mean, he showed all that talent with the Pelicans, and we're like, man, if he ever had a really good team around him, he would go to new heights. And look where we are. He's in new heights. So, I mean, I'm happy for Anthony Davis, such a skilled player too. I mean, he does so many different things very, very well. And if you pair him with LeBron James and those two guys, again, they're going to be tough to beat, not only now, but probably for the next few years. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. And Anthony Davis will probably take over as another leader on that team.
Yeah.
Again, we're assuming LeBron James is going to go downhill at some point, which is a big if. Because by the laws of physics, he should. But it still hasn't happened yet. Our producer, Alex Wills, just reminded me as well of a talking point that's got around the NBA over the past few weeks. And that is about the future of the Heat, because a lot of executives have looked at Miami between, I mean, let's face it, the weather, which is incredible, and, you know, the incredibly well-coached team led by Eric Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler showing that he could be a top dog on a championship level team. People are talking about Miami as a top free agent destination, and we can kick this idea around a little bit. I think it's a fascinating idea when you look at a Heat team that's really good as is, but could add maybe a top flight free agent or even a second tier type of guy that could help them not only stay in title contention, but possibly get them over the edge here. I think there's a lot of fascinating possibilities for Miami, even though they're probably going to wind up losing this series.
Yeah, I mean, this is big for them, I think. I mean, they were coming into the year. Not many people thought they like barely made the playoffs, probably make the playoffs in that East, because it's obviously not good, but they weren't supposed to be title contenders. And then the way Jimmy Butler has played, I mean, I think they're definitely one of the top free agent destinations. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone wants to say, look, I can live in Miami, great weather, can play with Jimmy Butler, a great coach with Eric Spoelstra. They know how to win. They could put me in great situations to win. Not playing in a good Eastern Conference right now. Again, it's going to be interesting next year because I think the Nets will be better with Durant and Kyrie. So we'll see how that all works out. But look, they're definitely a force to be reckoned with, and they have a great system in place. And if you're a star, you want to be kind of take to that next level, be kind of a cog in a machine. I think that is a really, really interesting destination to go to and to think about.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. And they've always had that really great coaching from Pat Riley, now down to Eric Spoelstra. It's also interesting to consider. This is probably a horrible analogy, but I'm going to say it anyway. All of us have been around, the Fordham program. And I remember when the women's basketball team played Notre Dame and they played them close in that game. I'm sure that helped recruiting wise to see, your team taking the defending national runner up to the wall. That couldn't have hurt. If anything, it definitely helped. I'm sure it did. But this is a little bit like that, where the Heat are on TV, and now they're in the conference finals. Now they're in the NBA finals, and you're like, well, they got something really good there. Like they could use maybe a piece or two. And then if you're a top free agent, you're sitting there saying, maybe I could be that piece. And it's an interesting thought process. And I think Miami has to feel really good about this. Like I said, even though they're probably going to lose this series, the season that they had getting to the finals and other free agents seeing, hey, they've got a great coach, they've got the culture, they've got the system, they can do it, and I could help that team get there on a max deal. I think that could only really help the Miami Heat.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're a team that I think the culture is a big thing you said. I mean, if you're sitting there watching these games and be like, you're down two of your key players and you're still going out there playing hard, playing really good basketball, and look, taking a star-studded Lakers team to the wire, basically, in a lot of these games. So you got to give them a ton of credit. And I think if you're sitting there and if you're a star, you're like, I can play with them and I can maybe help them beat a team like the Lakers or beat like the Nets with KD, Kyrie. Like I could definitely see that. And that's definitely an interesting point. And it's like another wrench kind of thrown into this NBA free agency period. It's going to be definitely interesting to watch.
Yeah, the NBA free agency period is also a really interesting point, given what's the cap going to be, what are teams going to be able to spend. I don't know how that plays into it because I haven't seen the numbers yet. That's the big unknown, really, with all these sports, the NBA in particular, because the NBA cap has been going up for years and years. And 2016 in particular took a huge hike with the new TV deal. Now I don't know how to assess it. It's probably going to go back down a little bit. And, they did a great job staging the playoffs, having the bubble, but at some point you're like, okay, the cap is probably going to drop at least a little bit. And I think that's going to hamper some teams here, Andrew, where they might have a little bit of trouble spending in the coming months and maybe even the next couple of years. So I think that's another great equalizer here in the NBA as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point because I just know in the NFL, like teams, they're like kind of need the NFL cap to go up. And it's same in the NBA. They are projecting, okay, we're going to go up. We're going to pay these guys this amount. Guys are getting max deals. So their numbers are only going up. So you're going to have to pay them plus adding other guys with a cap that, let's say it stays the same, could go down. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how free agency works out. Maybe stars are going to take 1-year deals to try to just be like, okay, I'm going to cash in next year when the cap goes back up. It's definitely going to be kind of a weird free agency period to see what guys do. And maybe if you're the Heat and you can get a guy on a 1-year deal, cheap maybe, that may be an option too. It's going to be very interesting.
It is going to be really interesting. I think a lot of unknown around the NBA right now. So Heat Lakers, that's probably the one known commodity. And by the way, just before we wrap up this segment, shout out to the NBA and Adam Silver for doing the bubble. I was highly skeptical they were going to be able to finish this season back in April and May. And good on them for being able to do this, that we can get a champion and finish the season, have a finals. That being said, so Andrew, you have the Lakers winning on Friday night.
Yeah.
And closing this out in 5, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate to do this to Miami. I actually, at the beginning of the series, I had Miami in 7. Wow. I had not Miami. I had the Lakers in 7.
Yeah.
That's an important clarification. But I'm going to. I probably have to take the Lakers too. As much as I hate to say it, I'm going to go with LA. I think that's probably going to be the way we got to go here. But it's nonetheless great season for the Heat. I think this is beyond their wildest expectations. And hey, good on them and good on Eric Spoelstra for being able to get it done. So this concludes our NBA talk. And coming up next, Andrew, I see that Saints flag in your background. We're not going to be talking about a good division like the NFC South. Because why would we do that? We're going to be talking about the worst division in football, the NFC East. A lot to get into there. So much dysfunction. So little time. We'll be right back. Stay with us. This is One on One. to one-on-one, exactly halfway through our show here on this Wednesday night. Andrew Galata, Jimmy Sullivan with you. Nick DeLuca will join us later in the show. Again, we are on Twitter and YouTube. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, general thoughts, you can leave them there on Twitter or on YouTube. Either way, we will try to get to them. So please leave those for us if you have them. Andrew, we are now going to get into the absolute worst division in football. I cannot wait to talk about it. And that is, of course, the NFC. Andrew, I referenced your Saints paraphernalia in the background. The Saints are part of one of the best divisions in football in the NFC South. The Giants, on the other hand, our local team, are part of the worst division in football. Absolutely. No question about it. We're going to talk about the different facets of the NFC East here. We'll start with the Giants. We're going to work our way up through the division to the 1-2-1 Philadelphia Eagles. And we will look at every team as bad as they have been. But we'll start with the Giants. They're an 0-4. They have the worst offense statistically in football. That includes the Jets. They have scored the least points in the league through 4 games. Another stinker offensively on Sunday. They scored 9 points in a loss to the Rams. They lose 17-9. Andrew, starting with the Giants offensively, I think a lot of this centers around Daniel Jones, and he has not looked particularly good in the early going this season. And Andrew, I think it's to the point where it's probably a little concerning. He's turned the ball over a lot. He's made some bad decisions. And Andrew, I think that's pretty concerning for Giants fans right now.
Yeah, I mean, going into the season, the Giants thought their defense was going to be the big issue, and it turns around. And I think Barkley getting hurt is obviously a huge factor into this. But Daniel Jones, he looked pretty good down the stretch. He was starting to really hit a rhythm last year. And then it seems like that blown up in his face kind of this year, starting off in these first 4 games. As you said, being the worst offense in the league this year behind the Jets is really, really difficult to do. And the Giants have done it. And to me, it's puzzling because they have some offensive weapons. You have Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram. You should be able to muster up some offense. I know without Barkley, and the offensive line is definitely shaky for sure. But to be last, and a lot of that having to do with Daniel Jones, his decision-making hasn't been really good, missing some easy throws, not reading some easy coverages. I think a few interceptions. This is the last interception. He got baited into throwing it last week. So, again, I think a lot of it falls on Jones. But, again, I think Barkley, him not being there hurts him too. But I don't know. You definitely have to be a little concerned as he's regressed here at the start of the season.
Yeah, and you were talking about Daniel Jones's interception on Sunday. It was a comeback route that he just threw. Didn't think the corner would break on it. He did. But I think it's also interesting to look at Daniel Jones, and I've made the comment/joke on this show that you will get all ends of the Daniel Jones spectrum within a drive. Like on Sunday, in the last drive, he made this brilliant running play out of the pocket, got a first down, and I don't think it was 3 plays later he threw the pick. So the inconsistency here is what I think is really concerning, because he's shown flashes that he could be really good. Like, he threw a beautiful deep ball in the Monday night game against Pittsburgh. Like, he's shown you that he can perform. The problem is on the next drive, he's a completely different quarterback. So they haven't been able to find that consistency. And as you said, Andrew, he's got some weapons. I mean, Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, as you said. He's got some pieces around him. And if you want to count Golden Tate in that as well. But it's the way he's played, he's so inconsistent. It's still so hard to assess him because he shows you a lot of good, but he also shows you a lot of bad. He does not show you, however, a lot of in between. And Andrew, I think that's the trouble point for Giants fans, because they can't figure out if this guy's good or bad. I think that's a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, look, it is only 4 games, which is something that you definitely want to see him over a 16-game season. But if he's looking this inconsistent, as you were saying, you get everything on one drive. It's not even a whole game. It's one drive. And he's a guy that I think if you were able to have a running game with Barkley, that would have probably make it a little more level. But still, it's just, as you were saying, just very questionable reads, very questionable. But then he makes some big plays too. Like, it's like you're getting up and down. And what I'm thinking is if they keep on losing, would they then tank to get another quarterback like Trevor Lawrence? I mean, that's something that, would you rather get the slam dunk, or would you keep on kind of bringing on Jones along and trying to really get him to that level to being a playoff quarterback. But I mean, obviously the team's not ready right now to even make the playoffs around Jones. So would you tank to try to bring in a guy like Lawrence? That's very, very interesting, I think.
That's a great question. I've thought about it more in terms of the Jets, right? Sam Darnold's in year 3. Do they go take Trevor Lawrence? Because the Jets have looked like the worst team in football in the first 4 weeks, unquestioned. The Giants are down a bit right now just because there's a few 0-4 teams. I think they're behind Houston's pick, which belongs to Miami, because I don't even remember what trade it was that Bill O'Brien made.
I think it was
Laremy Tunsil. That was it. I thought, you know what was funny, Andrew? I was actually thinking about this because I didn't want to look it up because that's cheating. I thought for some reason it was Lamar Miller. I had the wrong Bill O'Brien trade where he gave up the first pick. Shout out Bill O'Brien. Imagine, by the way, just a quick sidebar here. So Bill O'Brien's leading the Chiefs 24-0 in the second quarter of their playoff game back in January. Imagine telling him at that point you're never going to win another game. That would have been crazy. That would have been crazy. Back to the NFC East here, though. That's an interesting question about tanking for Trevor Lawrence. Joe Judge, I think whether that's the right move or not, I don't think Joe Judge is going to let them do it because he doesn't seem like that type of guy. He's a super intense coach. You've seen the stuff he's doing in practices. So I doubt that he would let them do it. And there's also the question of what is Trevor Lawrence going into here? Because you also want to, I think part of it on his end, he has the leverage to sit there and say, okay, I want to get myself into a good situation here. So it'll be interesting to look at the Giants ultimately decide they are going to do. I'm not sure what the answer is. I think ultimately they're probably going to stick with Daniel Jones, at least as long as Gettleman's there. But that's the other thing. Dave Gettleman has not shown you anything in terms of roster construction that leads you to suggest he could build a championship contending type of roster. So if the Giants do wind up going into contention in the next few years, Andrew, I'd be stunned if it is in any part really due to Dave Gettleman. As terrible as that sounds to say, he just hasn't really shown you that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point about Judge too, like that they're not going to go for Lawrence because he's a guy. He kind of reminds me of Brian Flores with the Dolphins. Because coming out of that Bill Belichick fiery system, play as hard, do your job. Like he was able to win 5 games with Miami, and they were obviously not like a great team, but they won some games. And I could see the Giants doing that too because they're a team. They're not like the Jets. I feel like they're not a straight dumpster fire. I mean, I don't think they're very good, but I think they're going to win a few games. And they probably won't end up being in that number 1 pick. But I think the Giants got the coach. Do they have the GM? I don't think so. But I think Judge is the guy. I think he's a solid coach, and he brings a lot of intensity, and I think you need that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I also think the Giants will wind up getting to 4 wins or something like that at the end of this season, just by virtue of playing hard. They have played hard. You have to give that to them. They're bad, but they've played hard. So looking around at the rest of this division, let's move up to the football team. They are at 1-3. They have made another insanely questionable move here. So after a loss last week, they have decided to pull the plug, at least for the time being, on Dwayne Haskins, who threw for over 300 yards last week, by the way. And they're going to Kyle Allen, the former Panthers quarterback, in their Week 5 game. Dwayne Haskins not only is being benched, he's going to be the 3rd string quarterback on the depth chart, which is extremely questionable. Andrew, there are a lot of great shirts out there with all the Washington quarterbacks over the years. Add Kyle Allen to the list. But my main takeaway here is that the dysfunction and the lunacy that has gone on with this franchise for years and years just continues here with the news that we heard today.
Yeah, I mean, I think dysfunction's the best way to characterize it because, I mean, I feel for Dwayne Haskins, 3 head coaches in 13 starts. I mean, that's something that, what are you going to tell him to do? I mean, he's a young player to start and he needs some grooming, and you give him 3 different quarterbacks and then you just pull the plug after 4 games on him. And I think he has a ton of potential. He has a really nice arm. Kind of reminds me of Big Ben a little bit when he was really young. Obviously, Big Ben's in a much better situation and was in a much better situation when he was young. But I think they both have really good arms. And I don't know. I just feel like pulling the plug on him very early, it just makes really no sense. I don't think Kyle Allen's going to go and round the troops to win a playoff game or go to the playoffs. So why don't you just throw Dwayne Haskins in there and let him grow as a quarterback? And to me, it just makes no sense. I mean, that's my take.
But that's the problem too, is that Dwayne Haskins is looking over his shoulder at all times,
Yeah.
thinking like, "Oh my God, are they going to pull me if I do this?" Like, I don't think Dwayne Haskins has been all right. He hasn't been anything special. I don't think he's been horrible, in the first 4 games here. Definitely don't think it warranted pulling him. I mean, what do they think they're going to do? Go on some run here? I mean, I know they're a half game back, but yeah, congratulations. You go to the playoffs and you get like hammered by some 12-4 wild card team. Like, no, I mean, this is ridiculous. I just don't get it. This is why they're on the treadmill for 20 years. It's because they do stuff like this. They get the quarterback and they're like, all right, well, we're going to develop this guy. And as they're in the midst of developing him, and this is how development goes. There's peaks and valleys, right? This is going to happen. And then in the middle of his development, they're like, no, we're pulling him. That's ridiculous. I honestly thought better of Ron Rivera, to be quite honest. I did not. I thought he would bring some sense of stabilization to this, but I thought he'd make the right move here. And this is the absolute wrong move.
Yeah, I don't think he's calling the shots on this, to be quite honest with you. I think it's Dan Schneider, and I think it has been since the beginning with Dwayne Haskins, since they drafted him. I don't think everyone even wanted to draft him, and that's probably why you're seeing all this inconsistencies in and out, because I don't think everyone's full gun-ho on Dwayne Haskins in that franchise. And again, that's something that when you're looking for your franchise quarterback, you need everyone to be 100% in on him. And right now, I feel like it's definitely not Ron Rivera. I think he's a great coach, and what he's dealing with right now, really getting through the season, is amazing for him. But again, I think that it probably wasn't his call to bench Dwayne Haskins in my mind.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, we send the best to Ron Rivera. Obviously, He's going through cancer. You could see it on the sideline on Sunday. He was really not 100%, but he's getting through it. So good for him in that sense. But it's you bring up a really good point, is that when you have a franchise quarterback or a so-called franchise quarterback, confidence is key. And you have to instill that in them and said, look, this is our guy. And we're going to try to support him, and we'll point out when he screws up, but he's our guy. And haven't had that with Dwayne Haskins in Washington at any point, really. I mean, they are more willing at this point, based on the depth chart going into Sunday, to play a guy who has not played in 2 years in Alex Smith, and there's nothing against Alex Smith, but they're more willing to put him out there, at least according to the depth chart, than they would be for Dwayne Haskins. I think that's a huge indictment on whoever it is that's calling the shots down in Washington. And again, Andrew, that's a very good point you raised. We don't know who that is. But to relegate Dwayne Haskins like this, after, especially when I don't think he really deserved it, just absolutely absurd. And just another move that's setting the Washington football team back even more than they already were.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're a team that's, they're getting set back. And again, they're probably going to have to go out and get another QB, because at this point, Dwayne Haskins and his development is going to be like, it's going to start going down, because his confidence is going down. As you said, he's just looking over his shoulder. Who's he going to put in next? And I mean, you have Alex Smith, who's kind of a quarterback that has seen some success in the league, but he hasn't played in 2 years. And right now, I mean, it's puzzling. And when looking at the rest of the division, I feel like that's the characterization of the whole division. It's just puzzling.
Very puzzling. Let's look at the other two teams quickly here. We'll go to the Cowboys at 1-3. I'm concerned about the Dallas Cowboys, to be quite frank. Mm-hmm. Their effort on Sunday was terrible. I was going back watching some of the tape, especially defensively. Pursuit was miserable. The Odell Beckham touchdown in particular, like, nothing to take away from Odell Beckham, but they should have had him down a bunch of times on that run. And there were other plays as well that we don't necessarily have time to get into. But Dallas at 1-3. Dak Prescott's putting up crazy numbers every week. But the Cowboys are at 1-3, half game back in the division, playing the Giants this weekend. How do you, Andrew, look at the state of the Cowboys right now? It's a tough call, because on the one hand, they're 1-3. They've not looked good at all. They really should be 0-4 due to the Atlanta game in week 2. But on the other hand, they're a half game out of this. A win on Sunday they could very well be in first place at the end of the week.
Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys to me are the most talented team in this division. And again, the one thing I really don't like about the Cowboys, because we've seen their defense has been awful, but they still try to throw this air raid offense, trying to pass. When you have Zeke Elliott, try to ground and pound. The best way to shield a bad defense, and they're looking really bad right now, is to win the time of possession game, run the ball. And when you have Zeke, I don't understand why they're not doing that. And again, Dak Prescott has been great, but again, a lot of those have been in garbage time situations, coming back by 20 points. And right now, if you want to really shield a bad defense, I think they got to feed Zeke. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and keep the ball is what you're saying, right? Long drives, keep the defense on the sideline, because that's probably the best place for the Cowboys defense right now, if we're being honest, is the sideline. And that's an indictment on them. And look, it just has not been there in the first 4 weeks. Just has not. And that goes to coaching and Mike McCarthy. And, we'll see if they figure it out. As you said, Andrew, I think they're the most talented team in this division. I picked them to win it. I think I'm going to stay with that because they're far from out of it. You would not say that they're out of it at all by any stretch. So I'm going to take the Cowboys still to win this division, even though they've shown me absolutely nothing to justify my thinking on that. Quickly, before we wrap up this segment, let's move over to the Philadelphia Eagles, the one team in the NFC East that won this weekend. They currently hold one of the 3 wins combined for the NFC East this year. They are 1-2-1. Doug Peterson's decision to punt with a minute to go in a tie game in overtime is what has them in first place right now. But they beat the 49ers 25-20. Carson Wentz has been not very good, but they've been in most of their games. Andrew, as you look at the Eagles, they're not very good, but Doug Peterson, I think, is doing an okay job, at least coaching up this team. I know you're a big Doug Peterson guy. I've been a big Doug Peterson guy as well. Eagles in first place right now. Highly unlikely scenario at 2-1, but I think they still have a lot of issues too, just like the rest of this division.
Yeah, I mean, right now their offense is Carson Wentz, Miles Sanders, and a lot of injuries right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, I could see them being the best of the worst in this division just because I think their floor is probably like 8-8 right now. So I feel like if you're 8-8, maybe it wins this division, which would be crazy to think about. But I think that just as good as coaching they are. And I think Carson Wentz, I think why he's been so-so is sometimes he tries to be Superman. He tries to be with no one on his offense. He tries to do way too much and he makes mistakes. And I think that just has to do with them just having no weapons really at his disposal. The offensive line is really falling apart. And again, I feel like, as much as they are a great coach team, the talent right now it's starting to deteriorate for sure.
Yeah, certainly not. That goes back to the front office, and Carson Wentz just is been in a tough spot. Offensive line also is not very good for them either. So they've got a lot of issues, but so does the rest of the NFC East. So that's why they've got a chance. That's why everybody in this division has got a chance. 1-on-1, rolling right along here on Twitter and YouTube. Leave a comment in the comments section if you have any thoughts on what we're talking about. Last segment of our show coming up next. Nick DeLuca will join us. Hope you can stay with us. Taking you up until 7:30 here on Twitter and YouTube. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Final segment here on One on One. Got a little more than 20 minutes to take you through the rest of our show. Andrew Galata, Jimmy Sullivan, now joined by the third member of our crew, Nick DeLuca. Nick, good to have you with us here. Last segment, and we're going to kind of bounce around the sports landscape just a little bit. A lot of stuff going on, guys, and I think first and foremost, that's led by what's going on in baseball. Got 4 division series going on right now: Astros, A's, Rays, Yankees. Then over in the NL, you've got Marlins, Braves, and Padres, Dodgers. So, guys, Nick, I'll start with you as I bring you in here. As you look at the 4 division series and where they're at right now, what's one that you're looking at that you're particularly interested in?
Well, of course, I'm particularly interested in the Yankees and the Rays, and we got into that. I was a little bit surprised, I suppose, by the decision tonight by the Yankees. I'll go their organization as a whole, because it clearly wasn't a decision just made by Aaron Boone, but to go with Kyle Higashioka tonight, catching Game 3 in favor of Gary Sanchez. And I was surprised. I mean, I know Sanchez's at-bats have not looked good. He did hit that home run in the second game of the wild card series, but his at-bats last night were really just not, they were non-existent. He really wasn't that competitive. So I was interested to see that. And then just interested to see how this series plays out. But we talked about the Rays and the Yankees to open the show, so that's just my little deal on that. I'll go to the A's and the Astros was the other one that was catching my attention, because I'm just surprised at how well Houston is playing right now, especially without the aid of the trash can, or presumably this postseason run. But they have really found ways to win and piece it together in the pitching staff. They lose Garrett Cole in free agency, obviously a massive loss there, but also Justin Verlander at the beginning of this year to Tommy John surgery. So they are really doing a very good job, and they're winning with their offense, which maybe is a little curious. And especially after a regular season where they struggled for a large portion of it. So interested to see sort of how this postseason transpires with them, and to see if they can sort of continue their winning ways. They've got a postseason pedigree, and this is something that we've seen them find success the last couple of years. So we'll see if they can continue that. They just blew a lead to the Oakland A's towards the tail end of this game, or they were looking at a series sweep and getting on their way to the ALCS. Still probably looks that way, but just interested with what I've seen from the Houston Astros.
No, yeah. I mean, before I get into my series, I want to say, I feel like the Astros, I think the biggest thing with them, I think baseball fans, probably a lot of baseball players too, they want them to lose. Obviously, everyone knows the way they've acted and everything, just saying that, kind of denying what they've done. And then you have the MLB. I think they want them to win, because it shows that maybe the cheating scandal didn't mean that much. Maybe they are actually a really good team. And I think for the MLB's sake, I think the league office, they're probably thinking, we hope these guys win. And the rest of baseball is probably saying, obviously we don't. And that's kind of my thoughts on that series. But the series that I'm looking into right now is the Padres Dodgers, the classic underdog versus the favorite here, division matchup. And honestly, I feel like the Padres, they're just so fun to watch. And I feel like whenever they play, as a baseball fan, you got to turn it on, because so many really young players, they steal bases. I mean, they win with speed. They're able to get some clutch hits when needed. Their offense is some really great hitters. You have Machado, Tatis, Hosmer, Pham, Myers, all of them playing really good. And I think right now, I think baseball has seen enough of the Dodgers. Everyone, the biggest payroll, everyone wants them to go down against the Padres. And again, they're a team that hasn't seen much success here in their history. My brother's a huge Padres fan, so shout out to him. And hopefully they're down 1-0, but hopefully they can get a big performance here in these next few games. I mean, I just feel like for them, I think they're going to win one game, because I think their offense is too good to get shut out by this Dodgers team. We'll see if they're able to piece some games together. They're pitching. They lost 2 big starters, with Clevenger getting hurt in the first inning, then Dilson Lamet, who's been really good for them. So we'll see if the pitching can stay together, but I'm really excited for this series.
Yeah, those are two interesting series. Actually, they're all interesting series to me. I the series I picked is actually transpiring probably to be the least interesting series, but I'll go with it anyway. And that's Braves Marlins, and the Braves currently up 2-0. This series interested me just because the Marlins have this weird way this season of winning games that maybe they should not win, but the Braves are playing so well right now. Their pitching staff a little bit a little bit. And Jason Stark tweeted this out today. A little bit reminds you of the early 90s teams. Now, obviously, I'm not comparing Ian Anderson to Greg Maddux or Tom Glavine or John Smoltz. Not doing that. But with those kind of younger teams that they had in the 90s, I think that's kind of an interesting comparison. And they've been hitting like crazy. Right? Acuna, Travis d'Arnaud has had some big hits for the Braves. They've got a deep lineup, obviously. Ozuna had, some big hits in the wild card series. They've got a deep lineup. I would be really interested if they wind up playing the Dodgers, how that series would go. I think that's a really good matchup. I think that's with the Braves pitching being what it has been in the playoffs, which has been really good. I think that's a fascinating matchup, them against the Dodgers. And I think it's one that we sat there and we said, oh, well, the Dodgers it's a foregone conclusion. They're the best team in the National League. They're going to run away and hide. Now you look at it with the Braves and say, maybe the Dodgers are the better team, which they probably are at the end of the day. But you look at the Braves and you say, that's an extremely worthy competitor for the crown. And they could go ahead and give the Dodgers a really good series. So that's one that I'm looking forward to. That could be a really, really interesting matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of those teams, they just fundamentally sound. I mean, that's the thing. I feel like the Braves, the way that they play, I mean, especially being a Mets fan, seeing them in the NL East, I feel like they always win the NL East. And again, they do it because they play really fundamental baseball. And you look around the NL East, not a lot of fundamental baseball being played there. The Mets, obviously, they're like the epitome of not playing fundamental baseball. The Marlins, they kind of been like a flash in the can here with this year, but they're a team that I don't think you can trust. Nationals, they're a team that kind of up and down, obviously winning the World Series last year, this year, not so good. So the Braves have been that team that's fundamentally sound, playing good baseball. And with pitchers that young guys, you wouldn't think they'd be good. They're pitching well right now. And they're definitely a team. The Dodgers are the juggernaut, obviously, but it would definitely be a challenge for them. And it's going to be a great series if it comes true.
Yeah, when I look at the National League, though, I don't see anyone beating the Dodgers. I think the Braves have sustained too much damage to their pitching staff with some of the injuries that they've seen, and they have a very good lineup. You can't knock Ronald Acuna, Ozzie Albies, Marcell Ozuna. That's a formidable lineup, and Travis d'Arnaud playing like what the Mets hoped he'd play like. But the Dodgers, in my opinion, just have too much. When you're talking about Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler, I know there's some injury concerns there, but those two at the top of the lineup and Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, that's just that to me is too much for what I would perceive as any team in the National League. And the Padres did a good job, I thought, pitching last night, although Clevenger goes out early to sort of hold them down. But they left a lot of opportunities on the table, did the Dodgers, through the first 6 innings, and yet they still walk away with a 5-1 win. Los Angeles is a very good bullpen as well. So I think it's going to be a really difficult challenge for anyone in the National League to even really come close to them. Maybe the Rays or the Yankees could give the Dodgers a run for their money, but I don't see them going down before things start in the World Series.
Definitely tough to envision that happening. My preseason pick was Atlanta, but just without that pitching, as you said, Nick. Now their young pitchers have been amazing in the playoffs, but against that Dodgers lineup, even the best of pitching staffs, I think you have to be extremely skeptical of going into a series like that. All right, let's move over to another area of the sports landscape that has returned in the past few weeks. And I'm sure we're all extremely happy about that, at least those of us on this call. And that's college football. We got several big games this weekend. Actually, just got done recording our podcast right before we hopped on here. Shout out College Gridiron. You can catch that tomorrow. But let's look around college football. A few really good games. Well, there's 2 really good games we've got here, and then there's another game as well we'll talk about. But let's start. Andrew, I'll go to you first. Number 1 Clemson hosting number 7 Miami and star quarterback D'Eriq King. Andrew, how are you looking at that game as we head into Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think it would be difficult to pick against Clemson with what Lawrence is doing. Trevor Lawrence, he's been just outstanding with them. I mean, Travis Etienne also, he kind of looks like a young Alvin Kamara to me as a Saints fan. He's a guy that could shed a ton of tackles, make some big plays. He's a guy that I think paired with Lawrence in that air attack, they can also run the ball too. So I think a lot of people sleep on that. And right now, I think Miami, they're a team that coming up in here, I think people have been saying for a while, when's Miami going to come back? I feel like every time they're ranked within the top 10, it's like, oh, is this their time? This their time? Hasn't happened yet. I don't think it happens here. I mean, they have a lot of talent for sure, but I think they're just probably a few years away from knocking off the big powerhouse, the big dogs with Clemson.
Yeah, I also have Clemson. I will say I think it'll be a closer game than people think. I just have this weird feeling with D'Eriq King that he's going to be able to have a good game against this Clemson defense, but ultimately one of these teams has Trevor Lawrence. And I think that's what it comes down to. As simplistic as that sounds, as simplistic as it is, I think that's ultimately the denominator for Clemson that gets them over the hump and wins them this game. So I am also going to take the number 1 team in the country.
Well, this is going to come as a shock to the both of you, but I'm also going to roll with the number 1 team in the country. And I was a big proponent of thinking that Clemson might be your national champion at the end of it when things started, but they're just too good. You guys sort of hit on all of the points with Trevor Lawrence being a consensus Heisman Trophy frontrunner and one of the best, if not the best quarterback in all of college football, Travis Etienne. I like what I've seen out of their front 7 as well on defense. They're a really experienced group in terms of their program structure. So Dabo Swinney, Brent Venables have been there a long time. It's something you hear a lot in NFL circles, but the advantage going to teams that have been there before and programs that have been there and done that. And I don't think that will change this weekend against Miami. And it's no knock against Miami because I think that this is a team that is up and coming. And you like what you've seen from Manny Diaz's group, but it's just too much to handle with Clemson, particularly at home. I like Clemson to win that game by the spread. It's -12. I think they'll win it by at least 2 touchdowns.
So we've all got Clemson in that one. Let's move over to our next game here. Another game of ranked teams. Tennessee at Georgia. Georgia, very impressive performance over the weekend against Auburn. Tennessee coming in undefeated as well. Andrew, I will start with you again. How are you looking at this game? A very intriguing early season matchup in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that I think coming in, Georgia's playing extremely well. So that's why I'm going to pick them. I think maybe if Georgia, I mean, they just really, dismantled an Auburn team, number 7th ranked Auburn team. Maybe if they were coming into it differently with maybe not as much momentum, but I think football is a game of momentum. And I think that they're coming in really strong. The defense looks very, very good right now. And I think that they're going to have to win a lot of games, probably like they did last week. And I think that they have the right formula to do it. And I could see them definitely having a big year, potentially getting into the college football playoff because this defense, it seems like they figure out ways to win and their formula to win. And that's something that I think this early in the season to find that out is really big. So I'm going to take Georgia.
I really like what I've seen from Georgia as well. And I was really impressed with particularly what I saw this past weekend. I thought that Auburn is a team that I don't think anyone was expecting would come in and upset Georgia on the road, but was a team that could give them some problems with Bo Nix and Gus Malzahn in an offense that I think a lot of people respect around the SEC. But that Georgia defense was really, really good. And in particular on the front 7, we talked about this more in depth on College Football Gridiron, but Georgia did a fantastic job of controlling the line of scrimmage. They rushed for over 200 yards, and Auburn carries the football 22 times for only 39 yards. So when you control the line of scrimmage in that way, very often you're going to win. But I was particularly impressed with how Georgia handled things on the defensive line of scrimmage. They harassed Bo Nix, and they really made things difficult. And then Stetson Bennett, a guy who you weren't really thinking about in terms of the Georgia quarterback conversation going in this year, was a dude who really did a great job during this regular season and in the first few games. So I really like what I've seen from Georgia so far. Kirby Smart, they're really well coached, and Stetson Bennett doing enough offensively. Give me Georgia.
I will also take Georgia by a pretty comfortable margin in this game. I just think they're the better team. I said there was one more game we'd have to get to here. I'm sorry we're talking about this. That's Texas, Oklahoma, the Red River Remnants this weekend. Somebody's going to win. Texas comes in 22nd ranked team. Both these teams come in off a loss. This game as usual, I think it'll be a very good game again this year. Nick, I'll go to you first this time around. Texas, Oklahoma, Red River rivalry showdown this year. Not nearly what we thought it was going to be in preseason. Who do you like in this game?
No, absolutely not what we thought it was going to be. And it's kind of odd because usually that's a game that you circle on the college football calendar as a one that you want to pay attention to, but not so much this year. I'm going to go with Oklahoma, just really for the fact that I have more confidence in Lincoln Riley as a head coach than Tom Herman, because both of these teams do not look particularly good right now. And in particular, it's the defenses that worry both teams, because I get it. It's the Big 12 and nobody plays defense there anyway, but these two teams really struggled, and you know you're going to get good offense. Sam Ehlinger was not fantastic against TCU. You figure he's going to have more success against a lesser Oklahoma defense, but I have confidence in Lincoln Riley. Spencer Rattler is young. You're going to see some things that are inconsistent, but I think he rises to the challenge and gets Oklahoma a win over Texas, who is unequivocally not back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with Oklahoma too because of the coaching. As you said, I feel like when you have two teams struggling, like really struggling, and right now I think that both these teams are a shell of what they were supposed to be. I think that you always go to the better coaching, and I think Texas, I think they may have a better quarterback here. They probably do have the better quarterback, but even Ellinger's play has been very up and down, and I think that's something that right now, again, the Red River rivalry, probably not gonna have fans, and you're gonna get a shell of yourself in the stadium and a shell of what the game should have been on the field. So that's really the case for me, at least.
I will go with Texas because I think they have the better quarterback. That's a simplistic mindset. I have a weird time, though, thinking Oklahoma is going to lose 3 in a row. Like, I don't know. Lincoln Riley, I feel like, is too good for that. But maybe he's not. I don't know. Just a brief discussion, turning to basketball now. Game 5 of the NBA Finals Friday night. Andrew and I made our picks in that one. We've got the Lakers wrapping it up, as much as I hated to say that before. Nick, I will get your opinion on this. Lakers or Heat Friday night. If the Lakers win, they win another NBA championship, their first since 2010.
Well, Alex Walls is going to like what I'm going to say here, because I think Miami's going to extend the series to at least a Game 6. I was actually pretty impressed with their effort in Game 4, because that's a classic game where, all right, Miami takes Game 3 because they're not going to fall behind 3-0, but then you got LeBron and the Lakers who are going to come in and really make this thing just a cakewalk and blow the series open. And while the Lakers did win, I thought that Miami put together a really good effort last night. We'll see if they can get healthy as their guys continue to come back. I think they will make this a more competitive series than a lot of people are giving it credit for. I still do think the Lakers will end up winning it, but I think Miami will at least push it to a Game 6.
So Andrew and I have the Lakers. Nick, you have the Heat on Friday night. One last note here before we wrap up, and I'm already sad about not being able to attend this game preemptively. It has been announced, it's official, Florida men's basketball taking on Iona in the season opener on November 25th. And there is a particular allure to that game. Iona, with its new head coach, Rick Pitino, coming into the Rose Hill gym. That's going to be a fascinating game. It'll be really interesting. And Rick Pitino, back on the college scene, coaching his first game for Iona in the Rose Hill Gym. It's a game I'm looking forward to watching, even if I can't be there. Guys, your thoughts on that before we wrap up?
I mean, I think you said it best. You wish you were there. I think the Fordham, the student section, would definitely give Patino a hard time in this one. And maybe it's better off that there are no fans for Patino and the heckling that he would definitely receive in this one. I mean, I think, again, Iona probably, Patino, I think the effect that he would take, I mean, we're going to see what happens. I mean, are players still going to want to go, the high school players, would they still want to go and play for Rick Pitino right now, especially after everything happens? It's going to be very interesting. And again, it's going to see, we're going to be able to see if Pitino can get his footing back on the ground, maybe have a successful campaign here at Iona. It's going to be definitely very interesting with his past for sure.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating just to see what Iona's program looks like, and Rick Pitino taking over, a guy who has been one of the better men's basketball coaches for a long time in the sport. And you can say whatever you want about him off the court, which is legitimate and is an important part of everything that surrounds him. But I'm interested to see what he feels and how his team looks. And it's a shame that for Fordham and Fordham men's basketball and the campus that people won't be able to attend. But that's the thing that's really striking to me.
Yeah, we'll see how that winds up going. Guys, it's been fun with both of you. Andrew Galata, Nick DeLuca, thanks for coming on with us here tonight. And thanks to all of you on Twitter and YouTube. This has been our Wednesday evening one-on-one. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.